Welcome to Pop Psych 101
where we, licensed therapist Ryan Engelstad,
and licensed psychologist Dr. Hayley Roberts
break down and analyze how mental health is represented in movies, shows, books, and across the pop culture and social media landscape.
We will determine what lines up with real life and what is just pop culture fantasy.
This is Pop Psych 101.
Hey Ryan.
Hey Hayley.
You want to hear about a really interesting podcast recommendation for you and our listeners today?
I love podcast recommendations. Hit me. What do you got?
Awesome. So, Pretty Much Pop is a culture podcast. They talk about TV, movies, music, games, podcasts, novels, comedy, theater. They explore why and how we consume these things. They ask, how does pop culture even work in a world that is so fragmented and so connected? Where's the line between trash and treasure? These are all the questions that they ask. Sound pretty interesting, right?
I'm hooked. Yeah. Tell me more.
Pretty Much Pop brings together philosophers, artists, comedians, and other smart folks to attempt and ponder these questions. Most of what people like is pretty weird when you think about it, and you and I explore that a lot on our episodes. And thinking about it is what Pretty Much Pop does.
Wow. Well, I am so excited to be sharing our listeners more podcasts that do fun stuff like what we do. So if the listeners are interested, they can find Pretty Much Pop, a culture podcast, wherever they listen to their favorite podcast, or find it at prettymuchpop.com.
Yay!
Pop Psych 101 discusses mental health as it is portrayed in pop culture media. And because of this, we often cover sensitive topics that can be triggering for some listeners.
We also delve into the characters and plots of these stories, and therefore, spoilers abound.
So please, use your discretion as you listen to the rest of the episode. Hello, Pop Psych people.
That was a great alliteration.
Thank you.
Really yeah.
So, we just finished recording our Yellowjackets season 1 episode, and it felt like there was so much more kind of left on the bone. Forgive the
Ryan.
I'm sorry. Well,
Oh no. Okay, go forth with your metaphor.
Okay. So thank you. So, and this is partially stolen. I was listening to someone else sort of talk about these themes, like why do themes like zombies and cannibalism and like supernatural stuff sometimes get roped in with mental health themes like trauma or like psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's not one answer, but I think I have some of my own theories. And I'm curious about your sort of thoughts about some of this stuff as well.
Yeah. So to tell you the truth, like I frequently don't think about things like this.
Okay. That's okay.
But I woke up to, I guess I didn't wake up to it, but I got a text this morning from you that said, I heard a really interesting take on why cannibalism is in right now. And I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? So why do I think cannibalism is in right now? I think, so I did some of my growing up in the Tahoe area. And so we have local history of the Donner Party, which notoriously
of course
ate other people for survival.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always just like part of local conversation and lore. And I think what it comes down to is we as humans are like curious about what would I do in that situation, particularly 100%. In these arguments that make sense while also have these huge kind of like moralistic boundaries as well. And so like I think that's why people get super curious about zombies or cannibalism or things like that, because it's like, well, if my mom was a zombie, would I kill her? Like uncertain of like where do the morals end and the survival start within a context of variables that we can't control and may look a million different ways. And I think we don't know the answers, but we like to think that we do.
Yeah, and I, I think a lot of what you said is definitely part of what I'm thinking about. That people are sort of fascinated by this sort of fictional scenario. And in the episode, we talked about like, oh, desert island, sort of like, what would you want to bring with you if you survived?
Yeah.
And I think some of this is like the logical extension of that. Of like, okay, what if you survived for a really, really long time? And now you don't have anything else to eat, and blah 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 blah. But I think so. The take that I heard was also thinking about it from like a societal perspective, in the sense that in this moment, like why cannibalism now? Like why is the idea that, let's say, as a society, we are at a point where we are this is gonna sound so weird, like seeing in other people like an other, like that is just someone that I can use for my own purposes, or that is someone that I would be willing to eat, metaphorically, like I would break that person down, or that person has no value to me. And some of this is like the political landscape, some of this is the like cultural landscape, where people are forming very hard opinions about certain topics, and if you don't agree, then you are sort of not on just the other side of the aisle, but like you're becoming an enemy, you're becoming a person that I see as in opposition to me.
So why do you think that leads to an interest in cannibalism in media?
So yeah, because, and we haven't seen it yet in Yellowjackets. It's only alluded to, right? That eventually this group breaks down into like factions or camps or gangs, where some of the characters are going to go and follow Lottie and kind of go full cult, and maybe our other four main characters are going to break off from that. I don't know. Or maybe they all go cult, but then they all get rescued in different ways, and it's like maybe some of them are okay with eating each other, some of them maybe probably not, we don't know. But I think that's sort of what I'm seeing, is like it doesn't take much for these girls to turn on each other. We see how they all turn on Jackie, right? And this sort of like post mushroom haze experience, right? Partially from Lottie's direction of like, you stole Travis away from Nat, right? Stole what wasn't yours.
And Nat like didn't even, I mean, she cared, she like didn't care.
Right, exactly.
Like she was not an instigating force at all.
Well, right, but this all idea that all it took was like Lottie, who was over the course of the show becoming this sort of like weirdly charismatic touch point for everyone. Like, yeah, she's crazy, but like maybe there's value to this. Where, if she says something, it's like, well, I mean, Lottie got a bear to sacrifice itself to us. Like, we should probably follow her, right? And even if that leads to, let's say, cannibalism, how people are willing to follow someone, even if from another perspective, that person, like other people call Lottie crazy, or other people like, and Ty in particular is like, I don't believe any of that stuff.
Yeah.
She only believes in sort of what's logical. So I think that if we zoom out, like that is something that happens in our society from a cultural perspective as well.
Interesting. Yeah. And this like seems like a leftward turn, but like I'm like thinking about Ty's more like fugue like states. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is this supernatural whatever taking over her in those moments because she doesn't believe?
Right. Is there a part of her that does accept it, or that does follow it, whether that's out of fear or out of the fugue state? Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah. It's getting back at her. It's getting mad at her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wild. Interesting.
Well, yeah, because you think about other times in our like pop culture, sort of like the stuff that we consume, and there have been times, I know, when it's been like a zombie movie coming out every year.
Yeah.
And when those movies started to become big, you'll hear people talk about, oh, well, it was like some of that was like the first the first addiction waves, and it was like, oh my God, people are becoming, like drug abusers en masse. They're just becoming zombies. So it's like, is this a way to reflect what people's natural fears are of like a mass of people becoming dangerous, right, for one way or another? And I do think that there's something to be said for how we choose to represent our very reality-based fears, but in these sort of fantastic or supernatural ways.
It feels very chicken and the egg,
That's
right?
totally fair.
Like the people who write things are a part of our culture, and our culture is very
Yes.
much affected by the things that we are watching and talking about. And so
Mm-hmm.
then it's this like, which started what?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I think, and I think about a character like Lottie in particular, where is she psychic? Is she just a schizophrenic person? Is she, because I think in particular the scene that I sort of struggle with, like, where are they taking this narrative, was the like seance,
Mm-hmm.
where, a person experiencing psychosis, especially someone off their medication that was presumably helping them with their psychosis,
Uh-huh.
could be kind of wrapped up in that experience and made to look like they were channeling spirits, perhaps, right? Is that fair to say?
Yes, and I also think what's really important to take into account is culture. So there are a
Yeah.
lot of cultures where seeing things like spirits or the future or other things is not
Mm-hmm.
a mental health issue. It's
Right.
part of the culture. So you will find in like Haitian cultures or like African cultures, or I'm guessing some like Eastern cultures,
Mm-hmm.
there are people who see things or hear ghosts or speak to their ancestors or things like that in a way that it is entirely normal and actually within normal range for that culture. But then if they were to come and
Mm-hmm.
see you and me and we weren't taking into account their culture, we were only taking into account our culture, we would immediately
Yep.
medicate them.
Right. Right. And
Where
there's some
yeah,
inherent problems with that for sure. Yeah.
absolutely. And also like studies have kind of shown that like some of those people, I can't actually remember if I've read a study on this or if we were just talking about it once when we were talking about other studies, but this is a thought that I have. So, a thought that I have is that, like, when some of these people are kind of spoken about, like, how they're seeing things or like how they're engaging with those things, it's in its essence much different than hallucinations or those kind of things in our culture, and it's actually like in its
Mm-hmm.
essence much different, and I think that that's really important. And what is interesting is we hear with Lottie, her mom is like, she has a gift, and her dad is like, we need to get her medicated as quickly as possible.
Yep.
And that kind of leads to this like, I mean, it leads to the plot as well, which is like, is it that she needed to be medicated or is it that she has a gift? And they want us to
Well, right.
not know
Right.
that. Yeah.
Because whether it's a gift or medication need, a bear does come and lie down in front of her.
And weird stuff keeps
So
happening.
if we're right, very, and like the
Car
bone
crash.
necklace, right? And her seeing the red river,
Uh-huh.
so there.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where I'm very curious to see how this plays out,
Yeah.
is do they treat it, are we treating this as like as God, I don't even want to say reality based, because I think, to your point,
Are they treating it as though it's
these
entirely a mental health condition, or are they treating it as though
right.
this is a true experience for her?
Right, right. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things I'm most curious about, because I think, in the episode we talked about, I referenced Lost, and Lost obviously
Yeah.
went like full supernatural,
Yeah. This
whereas it
feels
was
like it's going
initially
that way.
based in these people crash landed on an island, and now
Mhm.
it's just survival. And then by the
Yeah.
end, it was like, oh no, actually they were in purgatory the whole time.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting too is the thought that I had completely left my mind. That's what's real interesting about it. You were talking about Lost and Purgatory and Lottie. Is it real or is it not? Nope, it's gone. Doesn't matter.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. See, this is the stuff that gets edited out, the main episode.
That's right. You guys just get to hear the raw, uncut conversation. Because I think that's, and we talked about how the show initially in the first couple episodes like felt so grounded and felt so well
Yeah.
done in terms of how they were choosing to represent a lot of these things. And, this sort of phrase is like it jumped the shark, like things started happening where it's like,
Yeah.
hold on, are we really cutting off body parts in a bathtub with minimal emotional, response?
Effect. Yeah.
Are we really, sewing a girl's face back together as if it wasn't
In
this
the
person
wild.
didn't almost get right, like sacrificed on a funeral pyre? Like,
Totally.
oh my gosh.
Yeah. My thought, it came back to me.
Good.
A lot of Lottie's things, right? Like the bear laying down in front of her and things like that, and seeing the Red River, et cetera, the way that like Ty explains them away is also equally as viable, right? Like,
oh, absolutely.
So it is one of those things where like it, and not only coincidence, but like that bear walked into their area before Lottie walked up to it, right? So like,
yes,
which came first? What did what? Yeah. It depends which camp you want to be in.
Yeah, so I'm curious how they choose to portray that, because I think that'll be, that'll affect our season 2 ratings.
It will. I'm excited to get some answers.
Yeah, me too. And I think, one of the things I appreciate about the adult view of these characters is, the sort of ongoing reckoning that they are experiencing with trauma, just like, especially like Shauna and Jeff, like they go through this, backstabbing, secretive stuff. Did I have an affair? Did you have an affair? I actually did have an affair. Oh, turns out you didn't have an affair.
And her daughter knows that
that
guy's dead and that it's her mom's boyfriend.
Yep.
Yeah.
Next
season's gonna be great.
So it is. Yeah, there's still a lot of intricacies to play out with these things, and I think that's a sign of a good show, at least an entertaining one. Was yet to be seen, sort of how accurate they continue to keep it in terms of the trauma-based reality.
Absolutely. Well, that was a good little bit of a bonus.
Yeah, so thank you all for coming along for the ride, and we appreciate the support that you give us and allowing us to do this in a way that works. So if you have suggestions or requests, feel free to message us through social media as you have before.
Yeah.
We are at your whim.
Well, mostly.
Oh, so to a certain extent. Yeah. Don't go all misty on us.
Yes, oh my gosh.
All right, thanks. And we will talk to you again soon.
Yeah, talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.